This last topic relates to the use of compression on the mix bus, the main stereo output for a mix. Now, to be clear, I'm talking about applying compression to the stereo master at the mix stage, as opposed to doing it at the later mastering stage. Compression will almost certainly be applied in mastering, along with brick wall limiting, which allows for the hot levels of today's masters. But there's always been a difference of opinion among engineers and mixers about whether it should also be routinely applied, or applied at all, at the mix stage as well. Some mixers swear by it. The first thing they do is strap a compressor across the mix bus, set their preferred settings, hopefully some gentle, subtle compression, and then mix into the master compressor. They feel that since the mix will most likely be compressed eventually, this lets them make more appropriate choices when mixing that'll work better for an inevitably compressed master. Other mixers, and many mastering engineers, are strongly against it. A lot of mixers feel that the mix shouldn't be relying on master bus compression to glue everything together. It should stand on its own, and it'll be a better mix if it does stand on its own, even when some compression is eventually applied at the output bus. Mastering engineers often prefer that the mixer not apply output bus compression because it limits their options at the mastering stage. If the mixer has a heavy hand or just makes choices that run counter to what the mastering guy feels he needs to do, he may feel like he has limited options. He can try to undo the master compression added in the mix, not always easy or possible to do effectively. Or he could request an uncompressed track from the mixer. The second option is more political, because the mixer may be offended or feel that the mix wasn't designed to be heard without the compression he applied to the output. Now, there's no real answer to this. Like I said, it's an honest difference of opinion among a lot of talented and capable engineers. What I like to do falls somewhere in between and might be worth a try. I find some merit in both arguments. I prefer to mix without any compression in the master bus. I do feel the mix should be able to stand on its own. But I also agree that since some compression will most likely be applied eventually, it's worth considering how that may affect the mix I'm coming up with. So what I do is to set up what I think is appropriate compression, and sometimes even limiting as well, in the master bus, what I think would be likely to be applied in mastering. But then I bypass that compression and mix without it. Occasionally, as the mix progresses, and especially as I'm heading down the final stretch, I periodically enable that master bus compressor and check how the mix sounds through it. If I don't hear any unexpected changes or anything that concerns me, I bypass it again and continue mixing. If I do hear something, maybe the drums are sounding too squashed with the added master compression, or maybe the backgrounds or ambience have come up and gotten too forward, I may go back to the mix and try to make some subtle changes that'll work both with and without stereo bus compression. A lot of times I end up mastering a mix myself, the economics of the modern recording industry. And in those cases, this preview means there won't be any rude surprises when I sit down later, after a suitable break, and move on to the mastering stage. But even if the track ends up being mastered elsewhere, I feel more confident that the mix will work as intended. I'd always send the mastering engineer the uncompressed mix, but I may also include a copy with the bus compression or my own mastering processing as well, as a reference for what I think the finished mastered track should sound like. The mastering guy has the option to go his own way, of course, but at least he has a better idea of the mixer's intent and can proceed accordingly. So that's the last of these 10 compression don'ts, and that brings us to the end of the course. I'll wrap up briefly in the next and last clip.